Yay. Hey, aloha, love tribe. Welcome to Bitcoin Peace and Music. I have a dear soul friend with me, and he is going to be sharing a beautiful journey about Bitcoin and African spirituality through his lens of being an artist, a designer, and a gardener, and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu god. And he's working on the Satoshi Opera with us. I'm so excited. Please welcome Cain of the Oracle. Yay,
Hi,
Cain!
Val, how you doing? I'm so glad
Good,
to
my
be here.
friend. Oh, so good, so good. So, okay, so you're many hours ahead of me. How's it going over there? I don't want to dox you. Is it okay to say where you are?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm in London at the moment. For now, I'm about to change time zones, as I told you. Just going to be in the Caribbean, for the winter. But yeah, born and raised in London, so I'm here right now.
Oh, lucky for the winter that you get ahead of you. How fun. Um, well, so let's talk. I mean, this is an interesting, obviously on the show, we love to talk about all the cultural, spiritual, philosophical implications of Bitcoin and the threads. And so I love what you presented and, the journey that you want to share with us. So why don't you give us a little background about, who are you? What are your artistic influences? And how did you get to this point of wanting to put this thread together?
Sure thing. So hey everyone, I'm Kane, and yeah, I mean, my artistic influences. So I guess to kind of frame that, I just want to say that every person kind of subconsciously creates like what's inside of them, right? Everything you're programmed and that's given to you and that inspires you, you let it out, and it's no different for me, of course. Ever since I was a kid, I've just been into like sci-fi, kind of like fantasy, occultism, kind of like thinking about other worlds, right? I believe that I came here to share art because for as long as I can remember, I've always been like drawing, painting, and I used to like cry when I couldn't get stuff. I used to literally religiously sit down in one spot and cry until I could get a drawing right.
No way. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Um, so
How
that's just
old were
kind of
you when
me.
that started, Kane?
Literally, I can remember. Honestly, must have been about 5 years old doing that kind of stuff, and it's also, I also believe that because I've always had figures in my life as well who've always said to me, keep drawing, keep doing this. For some reason, one reason or another, it's just always been there. So yeah, it kind of just shaped me into the kind of person I am now. Um, Imagination and painting and drawing is how I kind of breathe. And yeah, it's how I express all of these interests that I have in sci-fi, ancestral history as well. As I just mentioned, I'm from London, but my parents are from the Caribbean, and I have an interest in history too. So I look into where they came from and Caribbean culture and what's behind that, and I guess that's kind of like pushed me into kind of this thought that I'm about to present to you today about Bitcoin connecting to African spirituality, because I was just digging into the past and came up on some things that I noticed. Yeah.
And so with, you were talking about with mysticism and occultism and supernatural sci-fi stuff, like
Yeah.
what what does it feel like in your body when you think of that? For some, because my body gets tingly and I'm like, oh yeah, this is interesting. Like what goes on for you?
For me, it kind of manifests as an excitement too, but also it manifests as like literal like visual thoughts about
Mm.
concepts and things. I've also saying, in speaking about like my past, I've had my own supernatural experiences, like ghosts, like when, certain family member of mine died, and I didn't just experience this experience alone. I was in a room full of people and they were like moving stuff about. It's really weird, but
Mm.
that kind of thing happening to me from an early age, and other kind of experiences that don't really make sense, but it feels like, when your intuition's talking to you and you kind of just notice it, and it's like, oh, okay, it's not an accident, it's being given messages. Yeah, just noticing that and kind of living that way of is really kind of, I guess, inspired me to want to visualize this experience and thinking about these things. So yeah, if I had to think about, when I think about supernatural stuff, I visualize it, to be honest, and I want to share that. Yeah.
And so you just mentioned that you had like some experiences that some stuff was moving in a room and other people were seeing it.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting to me, Cain. We got pulling that thread just a bit.
yeah, I mean, we so basically, like, long story short, my younger cousin died when we were like kids, and she used to play with like the kettle switch, like you can have like a manual switch on the kettle. She used to do that, and yeah, when she died, like, we were staying over her house, trying to like spend time with with her mom and console her mom and just be there and be present. And yeah, she basically, I guess her presence, maybe she was trying to let us know that she was still around and that she was okay or something, because the mood was kind of like, as you can tell, like, or can expect, glum. But she started moving the switch like she used to. But the kicker is the kettle was unplugged, and my mom and my sister were there, and we kind of like looked at each other, and then my mom kind of just like said out loud, like, stop doing that, Vera, stop doing that, stop playing with the kettle, because she always used to say that to her when she was alive, and then it stopped. It was pretty funny, actually.
Whoa,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, man. I mean, intuition speaks, and you just have to trust when you experience those things. Just, it is what it is. There's another layer of reality that we don't see, I guess.
You just nailed it there. It is what it is. And we don't know what we don't see. And sometimes when that veil is pierced, it's like, oh, right. It forces you to look a little deeper, perhaps, if you're a curious person, which it sounds like you very much are too. So this is
Yeah.
cool. Well, so how about let's get into the journey that we're gonna, that you want to take everybody on. So we've got the historical and conceptual ties of Bitcoin to African spirituality and how this, moves forward. So do you want me to let you just rock and roll this, or how can I serve you in sharing this the best?
Yeah, I guess, it'll be a back and forth with,
Okay.
what you think about, certain points of the conversation where we are. And I'd love to get your feedback. But yeah, I don't mind just kind of riffing and, yeah, just rock and rolling, as you so candidly put it.
All right, cool.
Um,
Then have at it.
Sweet. So I guess a good place to, or a good thing to do, is to kind of set the stage for this conversation, is to talk about, or just lay out how, like, stories shape reality.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess I want to, like, lead with the point that, like, the stories that we tell ourselves and that we live by define us, right?
Right.
Either they, empower us, or they restrain us or hold us back from being the person that we actually want to be. And when it comes to Bitcoin, I see Bitcoin as a story of upliftment. It really empowers you once you really get it, but it takes time to get it. As every Bitcoiner knows, you have to put the work in. And there are many doors, down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and the chances and timings of finding these doors, like, vary a million to one. But it starts with questions, right? Like, you start questioning things, and you're looking around you, and then once the door opens, you're kind of like invited on this mind-bending journey of transformation, one that actually kind of inspires you to take, like, the reins or the wheel over your own life, right? um and it's not an easy journey, as many Bitcoiners, again, can verify. Like, your entire, like, belief system is challenged. Your mind, your morals are continuously tested, because everything that you value is called into question. And so, yeah, I guess, like, that question, what do I value, is, it's a question that challenges our physical, mental, emotional focuses, because it forces us to ask, like, whether the things that we're doing in those different areas of our life are actually helping us to live a fulfilled life. Um, and it's a hard question to ask yourself when you really stop to ask yourself that. And I think, like, and even simpler way of asking yourself that question is to just, simplify the question down to what makes me feel good. Because to be honest, the base of that question is the same as what do I value? What makes me feel good? Yeah, and I see that as like a primal kind of question. It's kind of as old as life's instinct to avoid pain or seek pleasure. Because yeah, like that's, as humans and as organisms, that's like kind of where we operate off of on a base level. And then when I think about like humanity, that's also been a driver for humanity. That instinct, avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. One of the biggest motivators in building civilization away from like the harsh elements was that instinct, right? And I just really thinking about that kind of made me see that it's necessary for two reasons. Just to consider like how that instinct made us have a need to create like a common story so we could get away from like the harsh elements. And like this common story, right, is what makes people work together, right? Like the existential narrative or the moral frameworks that the community agrees upon allows them to work together. And so, yeah, it's just like, it's necessary for two reasons. First, like it gives meaning to why we're here, right? And if you're feeling positive about why we're here, then that promotes creative action. And then the second reason that I kind of came up with in my head when I was just thinking about this is it also puts, the story that we tell ourselves about the world that we're in, this moral framework, this existential narrative, also it kind of gives value to the things around us. It gives meaning and value to the things around us, the resources around us, the people and the objects around us. And once we start to do that, once we start to value things, it's only then that we can like exceed what do they call it, Dunbar's number, right? Like is the number of people that one person can maintain a stable social relationships with, and they put that number to 150 people. But if you're trying to like build civilization, right, you need to trust more than 150 people if you're living in like a larger tribe or something. So if you have a central core story that allows you to feel comfortable, okay, like we believe in the same thing, that guy is not just going to kill me randomly and take like my stuff, we can cooperate. And that allowed like civilization to scale, right? So that was just kind of like where my mind was first thinking when I was thinking about like this exploration. And fast forward to today, like despite our successes, this existential question, what makes me feel good, it still remains unanswered. I was just kind of thinking to myself, like, has it been answered? Like, does anyone know what they want? Is anyone happy? And I think it's even harder to answer now. And you mentioned it in the previous call that we were in, because you were saying like there's so many stimulants now, and there's so many like things that people are addicted to, that how do you know how can people know that they're happy if there's so much noise, right?
Yeah, that was something. So I wanted to touch on that because totally it's a survival mechanism to seek, to avoid pain, and to seek, whether it's neutrality or pleasure, but certainly to avoid pain is don't put your hand on the stove. That's it. That's survival. I think I'm curious what you think about what's going on in our culture today because of this, I would say this inability or reluctance so much for people to feel any amount of discomfort and pain, that they are self-medicating, they're numbing out on social media, on sex, on food, on drugs, alcohol, etc., gambling, shopping, money, anything to avoid that sitting with the discomfort of the unknowingness of your future, or all those things. And so it's like we are constantly in this bombardment state. And so I feel like our souls they're disfigured. Like we're
Mhm.
walking around in this disfigured uh, arrangement of ourselves. And uh, we had mentioned it earlier, just people have these midlife breakdowns because they're carrying it for so long. Then all of a sudden it's like, this isn't my life, you know, and
Yeah.
this isn't who I am. And this isn't what my soul is here for. And so uh, how do you feel like we can use stories to get out of that narrative of,
Yeah.
okay, seeking the pleasure, seek pleasure? Like how do we balance that with, it's okay to have a little discomfort and pain sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, so this is, I mean, we're going to touch on this a bit later, but
Okay.
I mean, it's a good question because, I don't, number one, I don't have the answer completely to that. I mean, I have an ideas of how we can get to that as a Bitcoiner, of course, but again, like, because feel like coming up with existential narratives and scaling civilization to the point where we are today, at the point where we've reached, right now, like, it's we don't have a central story anymore, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
no one story, and this is something we'll talk about again later, but there are so many different narratives and people controlling the narratives that it's really hard for people to feel like they're building towards something as a collective. And of course, we have Bitcoin now, and there's a new sense of that coming out of the Bitcoin culture, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
But by and large, people are lost, and we're just kind of like these dopamine drunk consumers, and we're hooked on like digital content because we're in a culture of instant gratification, and we're trying to get away from figuring out what makes me feel good. And I get it, escapism is the norm now because there are so many distractions, and there's increasing poverty, and that reality keeps you in this like gridlock from actually even having the time to question the status quo, on the external level, much less like start to think about yourself in all of that. And it can feel overwhelming, and I get it, um but I guess enter Bitcoin, right? It's this Trojan horse of money that, it speaks to people with the long-term price appreciation. Oh, number go up, like, at first, right? But then once this like Trojan horse has been rolled into like the city of people's minds, then the doors break open, and then like the information flows out, right? Like the information of the true nature of money and how it affects reality around us and how it shapes reality around us. And then one of the first like thoughts from, I guess, the horse breaking open, if we're going with that analogy, is that good money is supposed to represent time, or your time spent working, right?
Mhm.
And so therefore, to preserve the money's value, it should also represent time's properties, especially its scarcity, because you can't just print time, right? You can't get your time back out of nowhere. You're on this earth for a set amount of years, and you never know when it's going to be up. Um, yeah,
Mm.
and then I guess this just sets off this chain reaction, right? Like, you start questioning things again, like, how does money and currency differ, and what are the properties of good money, and why is Bitcoin scarce, and all these questions. I'm sure you have your own. What do you think about that? Like,
Oh man. I mean, the fact to me that this tool, this Bitcoin, this sound money, this promise of a
yeah,
way to exchange our units of time spent can cause this internal and external spiritual revolution on the planet, which I'm seeing is just mind-boggling to me because I've been a part of, always been interested in spirituality and transformation. How do we change the world and, kumbaya and all that good stuff for my whole life. And so not once did it occur to me that the money system is broken and that's what's causing it. I always thought that it was something that was um, programmed or misguided or misinformed within simply just in our operating systems of being humans. And so I didn't even it just blew my mind open to think like, wow, this thing is actually the cause and the cure. It's the cause and the
yeah,
cure, and I'm like, whoa, okay, I gotta get down those rabbit holes. So it still keeps boggling my mind, because every time I talk to different people about it, it's like, oh, there's that to think about and there's this to think about. So yeah, it's one thing, like you said, we don't have that one single narrative. And one thing we do have that we all share in common, like you said, it's time. We all have to operate off of that truth, and so as Bitcoin being a representation of our time, how can it thread into that unity narrative of time and of love? I mean, I believe most of us, 99.9% of us, come here with the intention of love and growth and harmony and family and expression, but it gets disfigured over time. So it's fascinating. It's just, yeah, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I feel you. Like again, it's that. It's like, yourself and many other Bitcoiners can speak to how like this journey just uproots your entire like belief system, and you're like, oh my God, like what the hell have I been focusing on, all this time? Like,
Yeah.
crazy. But once you do understand the narrative of Bitcoin as well, because Bitcoin has its own narrative, but once you understand it, it's liberating, because you understand how we can be freed of this economic slavery. And that's the thing, like this narrative is spreading, and there's a global collective, being called to use Bitcoin to build new systems, to advance like our freedom and civilization as a whole. And I guess that's how or why I see Bitcoin as containing like these religious or spiritual like undertones or narratives, because it's it serves the same function as like these early narratives that we used to build civilization. It unifies the people, and it galvanizes us and pushes us to build stuff, and towards one goal. And I guess many people have like spoken to this, right? Like if we've had like Max Kaiser talking about Bitcoin being the spiritual singularity of love. I've heard like people like Robert Breedlove and Jimmy Song talking about like Bitcoin's Christian qualities, how it kind of like overlaps with Christianity. And even on Twitter, like I was reading a thread the other day from this guy, Muslim Bitcoiner, and he has a thread on how Bitcoin is Islamic money because it's anti-riba, and riba is supposed to be a sin that basically is like a debt-based systems destroy communities, because people are indebted and it crushes their lives and X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, there's just these many like fascinating religious and spiritual, metaphysical like undertones and parallels worth investigating, right? And again, back to me being who I am, and having an interest in my own ancestral history, I started to wonder how it relates to me, because that's another thing. Like Satoshi's anonymous, right? And because Satoshi's anonymous, you can project yourself onto Satoshi and Bitcoin as a whole. Bitcoin doesn't care. Like Bitcoin is a mirror. It's going to show you what you want to see about yourself and the people around you. And so, yeah, and just in thinking about that, I started to see this connection to an ancient West African system, a spiritual system called Ifa. And that's what we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to lay out.
So it's
So
IFA for those of you listening.
IFA, Ifa.
IFA.
Where to start? I mean, I guess a good place or a good thing to do is just to map out, where it came from, what Ifa is. I have like a little diagram on paper that I've like drawn here for you as well.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and just how it's used and stuff, so you can have a foundation and understanding of what it is that we're talking about. And just having that understanding is then going to allow us to like journey through time and see like the parallels between different religious systems, as well as how like these spiritual core kind of understandings arrive at Bitcoin, funnily enough, as far-fetched as it sounds. So a quote I want to open this with is Galileo's. He said, "Mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe."
I love it.
Lay that one there, yeah. So yeah, one of the world's oldest like ethnic groups are the West African Yoruba people, and they're currently made up of more than 46 million people inhabiting Nigeria, predominantly, as well as countries like Ghana, Egypt, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Benin, and Togo. And the Yoruba kingdom is like, the Yoruba culture and kingdom is complex, but the birth of the Yoruba kingdom started in an ancient southwestern Nigerian city called Ile Ife around 500 BCE. So that's roughly 2,500 years ago. And it's fabled to have been started, sorry, by this like mythical, supernatural man called Oduduwa. And basically, like, there's all these like stories around his origin. You know, some people believe that his father came from East Africa, and then, you know, his mom had him in West Africa. However, the general consensus is that Oduduwa fathered the Yoruba, I guess, clan or dynasty through his only son, who then had 7 children. So, you know, his 7 grandchildren spread out, and they were made kings and queens across the land and did all this amazing stuff, right? And then, you know, like, just looking at like archaeological findings from about like 1,700 years ago of Yoruba artifacts, you know, they showcase the culture's like really rich command over materials such as bronze and ivory and brass and terracotta. And that's great, you know, like, I love looking at old African art and it inspiring my own artwork. However, one of the most beautiful parts of the Yoruba culture is actually their immaterial outlook on the universe, which is through the system Ifa, right? So Ifa is a spiritual system that can be viewed as both a religion and a philosophy at the same time, because it's simply the study of life. And Ifa's wisdom is said to be uncreated, it's just timeless in the sense that no one knows where it came from, especially because many of the concepts that actually appear in Ifa appear in earlier ancient African histories in different forms, by different names, and through different people. A primary example of this is the concept of one God, a single supreme God. And you can find that, of course, if you look thousands of years before in ancient Egypt or Kemet. But, you know, in short, Ifa is supposedly the divine code or the divine blueprint of the universe that maps out every single person, place, scenario, thing inside and outside of God's universe. And it's interesting because, similar to like, you know, later day Christian concepts of the Holy Trinity, right? Ifa states that the supreme creator or God manifests itself in 3 forms. So the first form is the ruler of the heavens, called Olorun. The second is the ruler of the physical universe, the creator of the physical universe, called Olodumare. And the third figure or manifestation of God is the chosen conduit, Olofi, who can walk between both, kind of like an enlightened figure, right? Like a Jesus type figure. And then beneath God, so I'm just kind of like mapping out like I guess the creation hierarchy. Beneath God are the Irun Mule, and these are basically like spirits, right? And they're comparable to the Elohim in Christianity or the Jinn in Islam. And they're basically like the first beings that God created. And so the Irun Mule, these spiritual beings, they are said to like exist throughout the universe, with some destined to incarnate as human beings and then like achieve greatness before returning back to the spiritual realm. And these people who come down and, you know, achieve these great things and contribute to humanity, they are worshipped in death or revered, which turn them into orishas. And orishas are analogous basically to like the Christian saints. So I know there's like a lot of people who may know about like Ifa and stuff, or like these concepts, but they look at orishas as gods, but they're not. They're like they're kind of like saintly figures, right? And as representatives of God, they rule over the forces of nature. So their energies can be accessed through like humble rituals and prayers and different things, that relate to their energy. As I'm sure you've like come across like different rituals in your time and that people do to different deities. And so yeah, this can also be done with like your ancestors as well, because they've come before you and they know what Earth is like and they know the trials and tribulations down here. So you can also contact them. But the Orisha, sorry, are actually the pantheon of like deities that the African slaves took over from West Africa to like Brazil and Cuba and Haiti, and they became like sub-religions as Santeria and Candomblé and Voodoo. So that's kind of where that concept comes from. It's all Ifa. And then after the Orisha, we have human beings, and each human being is supposedly, blessed with something they call an Ori when they arrive on Earth. And Ori is like it means head in the Yoruba language. It means head, consciousness, destiny. It's got many meanings, and it's supposedly located in your head. And it's your personal divine spark from the creator that animates you. It connects you to God, and it has your destiny encoded inside of it that you must work to carry out in this lifetime by operating through good character, right? So that's just basically like a kind of like simple overview of Ifa from a top line. Do you want to contribute?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, can you see? I'm getting a couple signals that saying the signal is low. Can you see me okay? Or is everything okay on your end?
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you perfectly.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. Okay. What's the name of the divine spark again?
An Ori.
How do you like an aura?
O-R-I.
ORI is our divine
Yeah.
spark. So
Yeah.
cool. It's
It's
just
also where I get the inspiration for my name, actually, because I kind of see how I get my art as this channeling of
Oricle. Okay.
information.
I was going to ask you, like, why did you spell it that way? And so,
Yeah.
okay, now I get it. It's so interesting to hear this from you right in this moment. Just a few nights ago, I was doing a ceremony in El Salvador,
Mm.
and it was a beautiful ceremony. And we were, closing it out and taking turns and talking about what we're grateful for. And so, part of the singing that I was doing with these wonderful humans was about the divine spark that lives within and never let it dim. And then we were just on this call about Satoshi and the divine spark is going down. So I'm just like, it's so beautiful. Like it is truth to me. Like this,
Mm.
we do all somehow, to me, I think that's part of our shared story, is that truth that we do have some divine spark from somewhere, whatever we call it in our own, you know, letters and languages. But I think that does seem to be very common and beautiful. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to name that because I thought it was interesting.
That's fine.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you for telling me that as well. Like, yeah, I love just hearing how things align, in people's lives, and like we are always where we're supposed to be, right? And this is like the thing with the Ori, like it's more than just your intuition. Yes, it speaks to you, but it knows what's good for you. Like you chose it before you came here, supposedly in Ifa in the Yoruba system, and you have to honor it. Everyone has like an inclination or feeling of what they're supposed to be doing, but that
Mhm.
gets dimmed out, like kind of what we were talking about on the last call through the world. The world makes you cold when you go through these experiences that like try to crush you, but I guess I don't know, you have to keep it alive somehow. You have to.
Yeah, and I feel, obviously there's a variety of ways to keep that spark not only alive but bright,
Yeah.
and vibrant, and I do believe it is in alignment with what our unique destiny and our purpose, our dharma, whatever the words are that we all think about it. But like once we say yes to that and we have an unwavering yes and commitment and focus on it, it seems like we do get bright no matter what's going around, there will still be pain and trouble and strife, but it's like, I've got this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, the whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's
man.
just, I love it. It's so cool. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. It just
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the next bit of this is it's also,
Mm,
to keep a hold of that spark and keep that spark bright and listening to yourself and your intuition, you have to have like a reason, again, like an existential narrative that you're following for why you're even here.
mhm,
And when it comes to a religion or a spiritual system, the creation myth is where the religious or spiritual system gives its explanation about the nature of reality and why we're here, right? And it's interesting to note that like the world's oldest religions and always reference water and chaos as like being in the beginning. So if we
mm,
go back to like the ancient Egyptians, for example, the first civilization, they described the beginning of the universe as this watery abyss ruled by the goddess called Nu. And she's the goddess of primordial potential of all things that
mm,
can be and will be. Um, and, this concept of the chaotic nothingness, or, the nothing being there, nothing being present, can be represented by the number 0, right? And then the moment of creation can be represented by the number 1. So it's, from nothing to something, from
mm.
dark to light, from chaos to order, from 0 to 1. And, you know, interestingly, Ifa mirrors these concepts, again, being fabled to have its roots in ancient Egypt and pre-ancient Egypt. Uh, Ifa also describes the beginning of the universe as existing in 2 states simultaneously. So as this ethereal sky, and then as this chaotic watery below. Uh, and then what's even more interesting, as I started to go down and fall down this rabbit hole, is that, this metaphor of like, these primordial waters, I guess, seems to be present or it's mirrored in like modern scientific theory. So if you think about like quantum mechanics, for example, wave particle theory like states that, the quantum realm, or the energetic realm that we can't see, that underlies everything in existence, it's described as this sea of energetic waves, and then you have the physical particles that are also present simultaneously in this sea. So it's just really interesting to think about, and it's this binary framework as well that's like the foundation for modern simulation theory. And modern simulation theory, for anyone who doesn't know, is just the idea that we're living in a simulation, and it's a simulation built on quantum code of zeros and ones, these waves and particles, and yeah, we're inside of this. And it's funny because Ifa actually asserts this idea as well. And obviously, it came like however many thousands of years before, but it's explained through the Irun Mole, these spiritual beings that I outlined previously. And it's basically said that like light in the observable universe, right? These spiritual beings, they are present throughout the universe, and they are contained within everything, and they give meaning to everything, and they run the processes of the universe, because
Mm.
every Irun Mole has a task or a duty that it's supposed to carry out in the universe. And if you think about this like a jigsaw puzzle, there's tiny bits of like these Irun Mole spread out, right? But collectively, if you put them together, they complete like a body of knowledge or code, because every Irun Mole is supposed to be like a piece of God's creative power and knowledge. And so when you put them together, yeah, they form this universal body of knowledge or a code that's known as the Odu, meaning pot or basket or sacred baskets of wisdom. And of
Okay.
course, of course, a great reference for this concept is, the film The Matrix. where different programs or irun mule, they serve different functions in a coded reality that human beings live in. And like the film's protagonists, like Neo and Morpheus and all those guys, the Yoruba believe that in Ifa, like, it's possible to access and study and interpret these binary codes of this matrix that we're in. So to go back to the Orishas, these saintly beings that are deified, right? Once they achieve greatness on earth, there's an Orisha called Orunmila, and he is the Orisha of wisdom and knowledge and divination. And basically, when he incarnated thousands of years ago, it's said that Orunmila brought the complete wisdom of the Odu, this collective body of knowledge, to humanity. And the thing is, like, this wisdom was shared and documented orally because that's what Yoruba tradition, was, right? And this body of knowledge that he shared with humanity is called the Odu Ifa, meaning, it can mean like the complete knowledge of nature or destiny or reality. And in this body of knowledge, in this system, the Odu Ifa, there are 256 principles that Orunmila shared with humanity that speak to every situation in the coded universe. So there's 256 principles that speak to every situation in reality, right? The entire 256 system is based off of the first 16 principles, and they're called the Odu Meji. And basically, they're said to be like the foundation of Ifa because they're the most important principles when it comes to the nature of reality. And obviously, the wisdom contained inside of them is interchangeable, which is how you get 256, because if you times 16 by 16, it's 256. Does that make sense?
Yep, it totally makes sense. And so
Cool.
it's interesting, the 256.
256.
Shaft
Yeah.
256. Yeah,
We'll
that's good.
we'll get to that.
I'm all like, come on, tell me.
So much like the biblical structure of the Bible that's laid out in chapters and verses, the Odu Ifa, each Odu, should I say, each principle of each 256 principle contains around 800 or so essay, and essay just means verses. So every Odu has its own sub verses that contain further wisdom, that speak to the particular wisdom of that particular Odu, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
And so as a living body of knowledge, Ifa's, the complete number of essay in all of the 256 Odu, they're always growing because it's never done. It's always being added to. Knowledge is lost. Knowledge is re-revealed in history because it's oral. So it's forever growing, right? These verses. But there's always 256 Odu principles. And so I have this little symbol here. All of the 256 Odu have their own name and they have their own binary symbol to clearly identify them.
Okay.
So it looks like this. I don't know if you can see this.
Okay.
So each Odu has 2 columns, right? And inside of each column, there are 4 binary values, a 0 or a 1, and they're like they're arranged vertically. So it looks like this.
Okay.
And so that means that, like, together, all, each Odu contains 8 binary values altogether. Just to show that one more time.
Okay.
Cool. So an owl, or I guess you could call them a babalawo or an ayalawo, but you can use the non-gendered plural, just call an owl. They're basically supposed to be, or they are a spiritual priest that devotes their entire life to studying and memorizing the complete Odu Ifa. So all 256 principles, and then as many sub, verses as they can memorize. And as you can probably tell, that's like a lifelong journey, right?
I can't even remember what I have for breakfast. So,
Exactly.
oh my God.
Crazy. But so the thing is like it's believed that, you know, because they devote their time to learning all of this, right?
Mhm.
They are learning the complete knowledge of God. And by learning this wisdom, they're able to help people who come to them, you know, with questions about how they can align to their coded path or destiny within Ifa. You know, everyone has their Ori with a coded destiny. And so they come to them with questions. And so what the owl will do is through various divination rituals that reveal the relevant Odu or the relevant wisdom that needs to be shared with the people, you know, they'll go through those and then share it with them, right? The main divination ritual is a practice called Dafa, Dafa. And it basically begins with the owl contacting or reaching out to the energy of Orunmila, this deity of wisdom and knowledge and divination. And then what they'll do is then they get like a dark plate. It's called an Opun Ifa, but they get like this dark plate, and then they put flour on the plate, and then they will have like 16 like nuts, dried nuts in their hands, and they'll begin passing them through each hand. The left hand is supposed to be feminine principle, the feminine energy. The right hand is the masculine. And so they'll pass them back and forth, and then they'll try to grab all 16 with their right hand, with the masculine side. And any time that there's like one or two nuts left in their hand, it will determine a binary value, which will determine what they draw in these columns. So basically, they'll complete one column, usually the left column first, and then the right column first. So they're passing it back and forth. They see one nut left in their hand, they'll determine that as a 0, and then they'll write 0 there, and then they'll keep doing that and complete the entire diagram, right?
Mhm.
And once they've done that, an Odu will be revealed on the plate, an Odu from the 256. And basically, they'll then, you know, share the wisdom of that Odu with the client. They'll let them know the things that they should do or avoid, and just the general wisdom in that verse. And if they need obviously more clarification, they can dig deeper into the 800 verses. You with me?
I'm with you. Yeah. Keep going.
Cool. So that's like Ifa from a top level, right? And now I guess we're going to talk about like, I'm just going to lay out like how Ifa mirrors again ancient Egyptian history, and then how like Ifa mirrors other religious systems, divination systems, both in concept and numerically as well. And then how like journeying through time that eventually arrives at Bitcoin. So this is kind of where we're going now. So the origins of Ifa are basically like shrouded in mystery because, as I said, it was oral tradition. You know, the first Yoruba text language was only actually published in 1843 by this guy called Samuel Crowther, and he was this famous Yoruba linguist. And actually, he was the first Anglican bishop in Africa, in all of Africa. But yeah, you know, oral traditions have been the norm for most of our like 300-year existence on this earth, right?
Mhm.
We only really started trying to create writing as a technology roughly 7,300 years ago. I mean, we have evidence of a Greek tablet called the Dispilio tablet that they found, and it actually predates ancient Egypt and Sumer by like 2,000 years. So who knows what was going on?
Hmm.
But anyway, you know, prehistory is obscure because there was a lack of writing, right? However, what we do know is that the birth of the first civilizations, you know, they had to have been the result of complex cultures and traditions and knowledge that was like bubbling and building during the prehistoric age or the Neolithic age, right? They didn't just pop into existence out of nowhere. And it's the same with Ifa's core principles. again, they're considered timeless, and they're believed to reach deep into prehistory. Some Yoruba clans actually think, or they state themselves, that Ifa's concepts, as I said, come from the 10,000-year-old Nile Valley tribes. And the Nile Valley, tribes were in East Africa, and they were just south of where Egypt is today. And, they're the ones who are responsible for coming together and then building Egypt. Further Yoruba folklore as well, like, describes, the southern tribes, not the southern tribes, the eastern tribes, as coming over from, East Africa to West Africa to found the city of Ile-Ife 2,500 years ago. And they describe this as happening after the first conquering of ancient Egypt, when Egypt was conquered by the Mesopotamian Assyrians, roughly 160 years or so before. So 2,600 or so years ago, sorry. And it's funny because, if we take, what these Yoruba clans are saying, like, they're self-told stories, right? It might explain why, like, core concepts in Ifa literally mirror those seen in ancient Egypt thousands of years before. And it's not surprising, ancient Egypt influenced half the world and the cultures with the things coming out of there. One of these concepts is the Irun Mule, as this spiritual light that God's giving off into the universe. The ancient Egyptians, they described that as Amun-Re themselves, pretty much the same concept. And, again, the idea of one creator, a single being who created the universe. And it's interesting because, again, these tribes say that this happened themselves, but this also corroborated by, like, historians such as this guy called Sheikh Anta Diop, who was this revered African historian who traveled around the whole continent talking to all these tribes and people. And he states in his book, The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, that basically, like, the East Africans say that they came from the south. The southern Bantu tribes say they came just north of where they were. And the north and west Africans say they came from the east. So it's just, interesting to note that. Then, I guess, Africa's, prehistoric migration routes, they're kind of unsettled, if I'm being honest. They're not, there's no way to verify what exactly happened, where and when. But what is clear is obviously that anthropological evidence shows us that civilization was culminating in East Africa, first. And with that came influences on global culture, as I said. Specifically, like the Greeks, the Greeks took the ancient practice of divination from ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt used to do something called scrying, where they would stare into ink or water. And, the ancient Egyptian great scholars like Hippocrates and Thales, Socrates, Pythagoras, they're all known to have studied in the ancient Egyptian temples. And, they studied esoteric subjects, maths, practical subjects, but they took divination out of there. And I don't know why, they treasured it for some reason. And they infused it into Greek culture. And, the Greeks developed their own version of divination. They used to do things like 3-eye, I think they called it. Like, they threw pebbles, and then they would say that the arrangement of the pebbles told them different, information that they needed to know. And even the Greek pantheon mirrors that of the ancient Egyptian pantheon as well. The deities, the gods, literally, like, you could almost map them on top of each other.
Huh. That's very interesting. Okay, so let's keep on track. Like, how is this? I want to get to how is this all relating to Bitcoin?
We're going there.
Okay, let's keep go.
So,
I want to be mindful of our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, I guess the reason why I'm sharing all of this is to just say that, you know, history and civilizational building requires us to stand on the shoulders of giants, right?
Hmm.
And, you know, you could kind of like look at the civilizational model as like the internet, right? There's a physical layer on the internet, the computers,
Hmm.
there's a network layer, there's a transportation layer, and then eventually there's an application layer. Humans did the same thing, right? The physical layer is the human beings, the network layer are our groups and our ideas, the transportation layer is us, you know, taking those around the world in different forms, in writing, pictures, and then I guess the application layer is the things that we build and the institutions that we build to automate civilization, right?
Okay.
um, and it's the reason why I'm mentioning all of this and journeying through time is because it's very apparent that early tribes were busy building this network layer. You know, when we first left Africa, like around 73,000 years ago from South Africa, we were already early human beings were already making art. They were making geometric bone art. They were making shells and beads from sea snails and all types of stuff. And again, you know, roughly 13,000 years after that is when we started to leave Africa and go into Europe, Asia. And the thing is, we don't know, again, what stories we were carrying with us, the level of stories that we were carrying, the level of detail, what we outlined. There's just simply no way to know. But what we do know is that if we look as, you know, as early as 15,000 years ago, the Saharan Natufian people, sorry, they had like a really complex culture around death. So obviously we had some type of culture and religious beliefs around the afterlife that we carried with us into modern history as we, you know, developed the first river valley civilizations. And then what we can verify is that ancient Egypt traded with ancient India, the Indus Valley, by around the third millennium, roughly 5,000 years ago. And then, you know, the main focus of that trade was a precious Indian stone called lapis lazuli. And then, yeah, again, like with that trade had to have come stories and uh, information that we were trading. Again, like divination, religious stories that helped us to build these solid stories that helped us to, I guess, advance all of these civilizations that were being built around the earth. And I say this because if you focus on Africa and India, the parallels between their religious systems, if you look at the Rig Veda, which is a 7,000-year-old Sanskrit text, it's the first book in a collection of four, as I'm sure you know, called the Vedas collectively. And it's also the first book that is self-described as the eternal knowledge of God, which is, again, it's similar to Ifa because they believe that it's always been there. The knowledge was also orally transmitted through history, and it was said to have been divined, again, by sages in prehistory who heard the information when they were meditating, right? It's described as Shruti, meaning that which is
Mhm.
heard. And so, you know, this understanding directly flows into the Vedas, into the poetical musical structure, right? Which is traditionally chanted in song. But it also led to the creation of several rhythmic poetic meters in which to read the text, which helped preserve it till today. And, you know, in the very first hymn of the Rig Veda, you can see this. It uses a 24 syllabic meter called Gayatri. But in total, in the Rig Veda, there are a total number of 191 hymns, and it's said to be the foundation of the rest of the four books because it's supposed to be the complete knowledge that, you know, everyone else built on. So here's the thing: it reflects Ifa, like in the sense that there's a supreme being believed to have created the universe, one supreme being. Um, you know, it's the concept of Brahman that's outlined, this omniscient being that, you know, created reality, upholds reality, assigns jivas, destinies, and karma, sanchita karma, to souls throughout the universe. And it also mirrors Ifa in the concept again of the 0 and the 1, or the unmanifested and the manifested. You know, in the Rig Veda, they describe the beginning of the universe as an unmanifested water. And you can see this in the, I think it's the 129th Sukta. But all the point of me saying all of this is, if you take the 191 Sukta, which is supposed to represent creation, right? There's a concept called Avyakta Sukta, which was recognized by this yogi called Maharishi Bhashya. And he said that the Avyakta Sukta is the unmanifested hymn. And yeah, if the 191 hymns are supposed to represent creation, this hymn is the creation that came before. Again, the 0 and the 1, the concept of the unmanifested and then the creation. And that would bring the total number of sukta or hymns in the Rig Veda to 192, which interestingly is a multiple of 16, meaning that it would fit into the numerical structure of Ifa's matrix of 256. And these like parallels, I don't know why, continue to like mirror across history. We see it in the Chinese system, divination system and religious system in Taoism. So basically, and this is even more recently in history, so it's almost like these ideas are spreading and being built on as time goes on, right? They had in the 3rd century the concept of yin and yang, as I'm sure you know, that like became popular in Chinese schools. And basically the yin and the yang was taken from it was taken from a text called the I Ching, which was supposed to be written 5,000 years ago, again similarly by this mystical being called Fu Si, who was half dragon, half emperor. And it's funny because the I Ching like literally kind of mirrors Ifa in the sense that they have the concept of the binary, the manifested, unmanifested, the 0 and the 1, and they represented it in a different way. So I have this like little diagram. This is supposed to be yin, the line, and the yang, the 0 is supposed to be the broken line. And when you combine these two lines, you get these 4 symbols that represent the 4 seasons. And then if you add another line to these 2 lines, so obviously this is like 2 times 2, which is 4, and then 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. You get these symbols that are supposed to be these symbols that represent reality. And just like Ifa, they are the foundation for the divination text, which is a text made up of 64 symbols, obviously 8 times 8 of the fundamental forces of reality. And I just find it interesting because this system, the I Ching, that mirrors Ifa in this way, and people who practice I Ching, they also divine it by throwing coins and creating the symbols gradually, just like Ifa. The I Ching actually inspired this 19th century, a 19th century mathematician called Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz. And he was a philosopher and a mathematician. And he was described as the last universal genius. And basically, he carried this whole concept of this narrative backed by hard numbers into modern history. So basically, he was fascinated with Chinese culture, right? And this is how we're getting into how it comes into Bitcoin. He was fascinated with Chinese culture, and he looked at the I Ching, at the 64 system matrix, again, which fits into Ifa as a multiple of 16. And he saw that this 64 matrix basically maps perfectly onto the binary numbers 0 to 111,111. And he used this as his inspiration when he was creating binary calculus. That binary calculus was then used in 1936 by the math genius Alan Turing, who conceptualized the universal Turing machine, which is basically what all modern computers are based on. It was basically a concept for a machine that uses binary code to solve any problem, as long as a program using binary code could be written for it. And yeah, this is brought into the modern age. Fast forward to today, computers are everywhere. Civilization is running off of these ideas, these ancient ideas. And, it culminates to 1963. So I know I'm like skipping really fast forward through time here.
It's okay. We have a time traveling machine.
Exactly. But, these ancient ideas culminate into this math genius creating binary, and then binary goes into these computers, and then computers then eventually in 1963 create ASCII, which is the American standard code for information exchange. And what ASCII is yet again another system coded around the number 256. And basically in this system, every letter or number or character has a slot in this system of 256. And it's ASCII that enabled email, enabled like further advancements in computer science, and basically like the foundation of the digital economy to be built, and human beings to communicate their ideas across space and time. And of course, as this is happening, the United States with their paranoia is worrying about digital security. So the NSA uses, binary code to create most of the hashing functions that we see today, including SHA-256, which Satoshi eventually used to create, or construct Bitcoin's proof of work consensus mechanism. So that's like I was talking so much. Dude. But that is a really fast forward through time into where we are today.
But what I get it. My brain is squished right now. I mean, how I think the aliens just brought all this stuff to us. There's got to be some alien technology that just got dropped. How can all of these cultures have the same exact numerical threat? And then all of a sudden it's here. Like, how is this is so? You just blew my brain out.
I don't know. I just noticed this, and I was like, oh, like even if you go back to like the the Rig Veda, what Hindu was based on, right? Even if you discount the idea of this unmanifested hymn bringing the total number of hymns to 192, if you just took the complete number of syllables in the Rig Veda, it would be 432,000 syllables. And obviously the syllables is what creates the poetic structures of how the text is read and how it's preserved through time. 432,000 again is still a multiple of 16. So I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's just constant.
432. Who counts 432,000 syllables? Come on.
It's like, it's
what?
I the way I view it is having a narrative and then backing the narrative by hard maths allows it for it to be preserved through time. Again, because you need a strong narrative to build a strong civilization. So the narrative can't fall. It can't be lost in history before we've, created writing technology or can efficiently project it forward through time. So we need to do it in various like ingenious, creative ways. Like, the Hindus, the ancient Indians, they perfected it through song and like music, I guess is how they read their texts. Maybe even why like, Islam also sings their texts. I don't know, but I've just noticed this, I guess.
Oh my God. I can't, I'm just, and then all of this leads up to Bitcoin and SHA-256 and everything. I mean,
man, you think, man, I have like, I know we're strapped for time, but like, there's so much I want to share. Like, there's so many ironies through this beautiful, like, historic thread that's been spun. For example, like, Oh, so go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, this deserves a lot more time as far as like I could see this as a very long, beautiful long form article or like a 5-part series or
Mhm.
16-part series or whatever. You know? Um, it 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 really would be interesting to see you put this together in, you know, utilizing your some of your art, utilizing some
Mhm.
just like numerical representations of this and how all the threads are together. I think it would be really, really, um,
So I think that's why maybe like I don't know, I put it down to like ancestral whispering. Again, with the whole supernatural, like how I express it, I really visualize it. And when I think about this stuff, I really like visualize my ancestors standing like behind me, whispering in my ear all the time. Because literally that's how it feels. Like I'll just be sitting there and these things come to me like, oh shit, maybe I should just look into that. And that's what I want to do with this, basically. I want to create art using this as like my core narrative and just, I don't know, just go.
oh man. I mean, I'm already seeing so much stuff. I mean, okay, so let's do this because we've got, you know, I'll say 10 minutes we'll have left because I want to make sure that we get to everything that you have here that you want to cover. You know,
Mhm.
spirits or softwares, that's interesting, aligning destiny through coded systems, etc. Um, and I want to talk about your art because I love the idea of your art doing some type of whether it's oracle decks or something interesting to share.
Ah,
Like I don't
that's interesting.
do
Yeah.
I know what
Okay.
I'm saying? Like I'm, you know, I've got all my little cards. I love this stuff because they give me messages when I'm supposed to hear them at the perfect times. And for some reason, I was just thinking of, you know, Oricle cards for you and your artwork and your because the cool, you know, like I have the one I have upstairs is just it's called the it's a beautiful Oracle deck and you know, and there's a companion book that goes along with all the cards, and so you can have the beautiful art, and then it tells you something. So it, and then you pull things, and it's just I don't know. It's part of my daily practice, and it helps me with stuff. But wouldn't that be an interesting project to have this woven in there? I don't know. Just somehow that somebody whispered to me. um, but yeah, but just to I want to you know be sensitive to making sure that we get the points across that you want to get across, and then talk about your art if you want to, or we can do round two of an interview at a later time, and I'm happy to do another
I
dive with
think,
you on this. You know, so whatever
yeah,
flows.
I think a round two might be needed because yeah, like the concepts are I don't I the so the reason why I've like, for those who don't know, I gave Val like this sheet of points and she's
So
printed it
awesome.
out. But the reason why I wrote it out that way is because like first of all, I'm a messy speaker if I don't organize myself. I'll be all over the place. But secondly, is like the ideas need to like I saw them as being needed to be explored in chronological order so that again like a layered system, it makes sense as you go because you can only really like understand it as you travel through history to look at
Mhm,
this.
mhm.
So yeah, let's do another session. We don't have to rush this. Let's just talk about art and like let's
Okay, cool,
briefly.
cool, cool. Okay, good. So then we'll thumbtack it there, and then um, let's talk about art because I would love for I know that everybody, you know, people who might be listening aren't going to get to see Cain's art, but you got to check his visual art out. Like, do you want to show us in the background some stuff you're working on? Is that
Yeah, sure
possible?
thing. Um, what should I present first? Which one? Pick one because
The big one.
the big one.
The big one on the other side. Yeah.
So this piece is again about ancestral histories, I guess. This is a queen called Queen Nzinga who lived where I guess Angola would be today. And yeah, the concept behind it is that like she's in like the ancestral realm, but again, like an Orisha or like a deified ancestor, the people who are still living on the earthly plane are worshipping and deifying her. And she's also surrounded by these other goddesses, Athena, Isis, Kali, the Morrigan from different faiths.
Mm-hmm.
And because different people from different religions and different creeds and cultures around the earth deify these figures, and we give spiritual power to them. So I just wanted to kind of show an African perspective, but also show that concept through the goddesses above. So yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
And so for your art, like I've got your Instagram up. Do you have a website that people can go check out?
Not yet. So I decommissioned my website, unfortunately, but I'm actually building it again right now because, like,
Okay.
getting back into the game. I was out the game for a while. I was uninspired, but looking at all of this and coming across Bitcoin again, this is something I would like to talk to you about in another session
Mm-hmm.
about how these basic systems like realign us with our destiny. The same process is kind of happening to me now, and I'm just inspired. Like I just want to make shit, you know.
I
I just want
love
to
that.
make shit.
If we can just touch on that just really briefly for folks, because I think we can all relate at some point in our lives of feeling uninspired and feeling disconnected and like that we're not on point on purpose. We might not be feeling like we belong, you know? And so what reactivated that for you? Was there a certain point? Was it a process? Was it
I think it was to do with I know we tie everything into Bitcoin, but really like learning about Bitcoin and realizing and having my attention brought to time, I guess. We call it time chain, it represents time, and we
Mhm.
start to think about what we're actually fucking doing with our time. And I was just in this place like where I was stuck, and I started to think about all these things again, and I don't know, like I just started hearing, I guess, my intuition and talking again and saying I need to get moving again. And yeah, I just started to express and just say, fuck it. I'm gonna go out there, meet people, contact people. I don't know what's gonna happen, but my destiny is written and I just need to participate and take the wheel. So yeah, I guess that's
I
it.
I like that, just like saying that your attention was brought back to time, like to thinking of time or focusing on time. And obviously that's what Bitcoin is. It's a time
Mhm.
chain, and what an interesting thing for all of us. And I mean, certainly as we get older, we put I mean, I ponder death every day anyways, because I just think it's interesting, and it's obviously inevitable.
Yeah.
you know, it's the one thing we
Yeah.
all share in common too. But like sometimes we get to that point where it's like, oh, right. Like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know if I get tomorrow. I don't know if I even get this afternoon. You know what I mean? And if did you have thoughts like that going through your mind of like thinking about
Yeah,
your
I
limited.
definitely did. I did. I think about death, and I'm quite an existential like thinker all the time too. But again, even again, in wanting to look at my own history, and again, because I'm Caribbean and Santeria coming from Ifá and all of these things, just looking at Ifá again to Bitcoin, that whole journey, and discovering that they mirror each other, both in the way that they both bring your attention to time, because the whole point of EFA is to align yourself with your destiny, because the understanding is you have a set amount of years on this earth. Nothing can change the day that you're born or the day that you die, but everything in between can be changed, and your
Yeah.
destiny can be co-written. That's the understanding and belief. And so yeah, just seeing that and understanding that and knowing that and seeing that in Bitcoin, just I don't know, just made something crash, and like now I'm here just doing stuff, and yeah, just trying things and having fun as well. I'm having fun.
Good. And so you're avoiding that pain and getting some pleasure with following your destiny and aligning that spark within. It sounds like
Exactly.
all the
Exactly.
we just package that one up pretty nicely, huh?
That's a nice way to just put
Put a
nice way
ribbon
to
on
put
that one, King. Come on. I love it. Okay, so let's tell everybody where, and I'm really happy for you, by the way. I just want to name that. Like, I know what it feels like to feel stuck, and I know what it feels like to feel uninspired and just like, what the fuck? Like,
Mm.
I know there's something else. I just didn't touch it yet. And so I'm really, really happy that your spark is brighter and brighter, and you're on your purpose. You know, it's just,
Thanks.
I'm happy to hear that. And so, okay. So everybody who's listening, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, or Twitter is most likely where I'm, on tweeting all the time. But I'm also going
Yeah.
to start a TikTok as well.
Ooh, cool.
Same handle. I've already set it up, so I'm just going to start sharing content on there as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And for everybody who's listening in audio, you can find him at Cain the Oracle, CAINTHEORICLE, and Oracle because of ORI, because of that part. So yeah, Ori, I love it. Your spark.
Whoa.
It's so cool. Oh, I'm so glad we got to spend this time together, my friend. And
Likewise.
yeah, I can't wait to see what keeps, bubbling through you and this next part of your journey. It's really exciting. So yeah, we'll do a part two down the road, and this will be fun to see the other, future path that we can connect the rest of the interview with. But yeah, everybody else, if you guys want to go, I'll have show notes at djvalerieblove.com. You can always follow me at djvalerieblove on Twitter. And then of course, go to fountain.fm and you can support the show. It's a cool way to support all your favorite podcasters, and you guys can stream some sats if you wish to help. I don't have any sponsors or anything on this show, so I just do this because I love it and I want to talk to cool people like Cain, and talk about Bitcoin and African spirituality and art and everything else in between. So, yay. All right, cool. Let's take a big inhale at the end for everybody, and we'll just get present here and give thanks for this time we got to spend together. Inhale love and exhale peace and love out to the world with your beautiful light that lives within. Yay. Awesome. Thanks so much, Cain.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, totally. All right, everybody. Peace, love, and aloha. Until next time, this is your pal, DJ Val, and we'll talk then. Okay, aloha.
Bye.